It was early evening in Harlem, the kind of evening where the streets look calm, but everyone feels that something is wrong. The air was heavy, not because of the weather, because a message had arrived. Dutch Schultz had spoken, not in public, not in a newspaper. He sent the word the way men like him always did, quietly, clearly, and without emotion. If Harlem doesn't fall in line, Schultz said, I will erase it. Not one man, not one crew, the whole neighborhood. By the mid-1930s, Dutch Schultz was one of the most feared men in New York, a white gangster with money, guns, and politicians in his pocket. He didn't negotiate for long. He destroyed problems, and Harlem had become his biggest one. Numbers gambling was making millions, pennies and nickels from poor people stacked into mountains of cash. Schultz wanted it all: control, territory, respect, but there was one man standing in his way: Bumpy Johnson. To the newspapers, Bumpy was just another criminal. To Harlem, he was something else entirely. He paid rents when families were about to be thrown into the street. He protected local businesses from police pressure. He made sure outsiders followed Harlem rules, or left. And Dutch Schultz hated that. Schultz believed fear was the only language people understood. Bumpy believed something different. That's why the threat didn't come as a surprise. It was expected. What surprised everyone was Bumpy's response. Because when most men heard that Dutch Schultz was ready to wipe out Harlem, they armed themselves. They gathered soldiers. They prepared for war. Bumpy Johnson did none of that. No extra guns, no extra men, no public threats. Instead, he put on a clean suit, a simple coat, and he walked out alone. No weapon in his hands. People noticed immediately. Bartenders whispered. Street guys stopped talking. Even the police paid attention. Because when a man like Bumpy Johnson walks into danger unarmed, it means one of two things. Either he has completely lost his mind, or he knows something no one else does. The word spread fast. Bumpy is going to see Schultz. No backup. No gun. Some thought it was suicide. Others thought it was arrogance. But the older men in Harlem understood something deeper. Bumpy Johnson never made a move unless the board was already set. What no one knew, not Schultz, not the cops, not even Bumpy's own people, was that this meeting was never about violence. It was about control. And by the time the night was over, Dutch Schultz would realize that Harlem wasn't something you could simply erase. The meeting was set quietly. No location was written down. No names were spoken out loud. That alone told Bumpy everything he needed to know. Dutch Schultz never met unless he felt safe. And when he did, he surrounded himself with men, exits, and guns. Bumpy arrived first. A small restaurant on the edge of Manhattan. Nothing fancy. Dim lights. A few empty tables. He chose a seat with his back to the wall, not because he was afraid, because he was prepared. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. Dutch Schultz walked in like he owned the place. Tall, confident. A smile that never reached his eyes. Behind him, his men, too many of them. They scanned the room, hands near their coats. Watching Bumpy carefully, they noticed it immediately. No gun, no bulge under the jacket, no nervous movements, just calm. Schultz smiled wider. So, he said, sitting down slowly, this is Harlem's answer? Bumpy didn't react. He waited until Schultz finished settling in, until the room went quiet. Then he spoke. You said you'd erase Harlem. His voice was steady. Not loud, not angry. Schultz leaned back. I don't make empty promises, he replied. Your people take my money. Your people block my routes. That ends. One of Schultz's men laughed. Bumpy didn't look at him. Instead, he reached into his coat. The room froze. Hands moved closer to guns. Bumpy slowly placed a folded paper on the table. No sudden movements. Schultz raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" he asked. Bumpy pushed the paper forward. "Names," he said. "Addresses, judges, cops, union men." Schultz's smile faded. He opened the paper. As he read, his face changed, because these weren't random names. These were his protections, his shields, the people who kept him untouchable. And Bumpy had them all. "You wipe out Harlem," Bumpy continued, "and every one of these names gets exposed." Schultz looked up sharply. "You bluffin'?" Bumpy shook his head once. "Harlem talks," he said, "and I listen." Silence filled the room. Schultz realized something then. This wasn't a gangster begging for mercy. This wasn't a man asking for peace. This was leverage. And it was clean. No bullets. No blood, no noise, just information. Schultz closed the paper slowly. "You think this scares me?" he asked. Bumpy leaned forward for the first time. "No," he said. "I think it cost you more than Harlem ever will." That's when Schultz understood the trap. If he attacked Harlem, the heat wouldn't stop. Police raids, political pressure, newspapers digging. His empire wasn't built for daylight. Harlem, on the other hand, already lived under it. Schultz looked around the room. His men were tense, confused. They had come for intimidation. They walked into a negotiation they couldn't shoot their way out of. "You want protection," Schultz finally said. Bumpy shook his head again. "I want peace," he replied. "You get your cut. Harlem keeps control." Schultz laughed, but it was hollow. "You're asking me to trust you." Bumpy stood up. "No," he said. "I'm telling you the cost if you don't." He turned and walked toward the door, still unarmed. Every step echoed. Schultz didn't stop him, because for the first time in years, Dutch Schultz realized something terrifying. Fear wasn't the strongest weapon in the room. Information was, and Bumpy Johnson had more of it than anyone else. Outside, the night air felt lighter, but the real weight was left behind, because this meeting wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a shift, a moment when power quietly changed hands. Without a single shot fired, news of the meeting didn't spread fast. It spread quietly. That's how power really moves. No headlines, no gunshots, just conversations that suddenly stopped. In Harlem, people felt it first. The corners were calmer. The dealers stayed where they were told. No new faces pushing territory. That was unusual, because when someone like Dutch Schultz threatens war, the streets usually answer before the bosses do. But this time, nothing happened. Bumpy noticed it. He walked through Harlem like he always did. Same pace, same posture, but now, people watched him differently. Not with fear, with certainty. Behind closed doors, the Italians were nervous. Schultz didn't talk much after that meeting. When he did, he changed the subject. He didn't deny the threat. He didn't confirm peace. That silence was louder than any gun, because silence meant hesitation, and hesitation was weakness. The 5 families paid attention. They knew Schultz, they knew his temper. If he didn't strike back immediately, it meant something stopped him, and they wanted to know what. Meetings followed. Private rooms, late nights, names were mentioned, so were rumors. Bumpy has files. Bumpy has judges. He knows too much. Most of it wasn't true, but enough of it could be. And in that world, uncertainty was poison. Meanwhile, Bumpy did nothing dramatic. That was the point. No speeches, no shows of force. He let imagination do the work. A few weeks passed. Then pressure began to build. Not from Harlem, but from Schultz's own people. Routes slowed down. Suppliers hesitated. Protection cost more. Too many eyes. Schultz felt it tightening. He realized the danger wasn't Harlem burning. It was New York watching, and he knew why. Because if the city believed Harlem was under attack, Every agency would step in. And if agencies stepped in, his name would surface. Bumpy understood this long before Schultz did. That's why he never pulled a gun. Guns end arguments. Information controls them. One night, Schultz finally broke the silence. He sent a message, not a threat, not an apology, a request, another meeting, different place, fewer men. Bumpy agreed. This time, Schultz arrived first. That told Bumpy everything. They sat across from each other again. No paper this time, no names, just two men who understood the stakes. "You win," Schultz said quietly. Bumpy didn't answer. "Harlem stays yours," Schultz continued. "I stay out." Still no reaction. "But don't mistake this for friendship." Bumpy finally spoke. "I wouldn't," he said. That was it. No handshake, no smile. When Schultz left that room, he knew something had changed permanently. He wasn't beaten, but he wasn't in control either. And that was worse. In the following months, Harlem stabilized. Money flowed cleaner. Violence dropped. Not because people were scared, but because rules were clear. Other bosses noticed. They stopped seeing Harlem as a prize. They started seeing it as a boundary. And boundaries are respected when the cost of crossing them is unknown. That was Bumpy's real victory. Not dominance, not terror, predictability. Years later, people would argue about that night. Some said Schultz could have won. Some said Bumpy bluffed. But everyone agreed on one thing. After that meeting, no one ever threatened Harlem the same way again, because they remembered what happened when a man promised destruction and walked away without firing a single shot. Years passed. People forgot the exact date of that meeting. They forgot the restaurant. They forgot who sat at which table. But they never forgot the result. Harlem was never threatened the same way again. Not openly, not loudly. And that alone made people talk. Some said Dutch Schultz chose survival over pride. Others said he saw something in Bumpy that night. Something that couldn't be shot. The truth sat somewhere in between. Bumpy didn't defeat Schultz. He outgrew him. That's the part most people miss. Violence was expected from men like Schultz. It was predictable, easy to understand. What Bumpy did was different. He changed the rules without announcing it. No war, no bodies, no public victory, just a quiet shift. And in organized crime, quiet shifts last the longest. The Italians adjusted. They stopped sending messengers into Harlem. They stopped testing borders. Instead, they negotiated. That alone was unheard of. Harlem was no longer a problem to solve. It became a territory to respect. Bumpy walked those streets for years after. Same suits, same calm steps. People say he never carried a gun after that night. Maybe he didn't need one, because power had moved somewhere else, into conversations, into leverage, into patience. When Bumpy eventually died, the city noticed. Thousands showed up, not because he was feared, but because he was understood. He proved something dangerous, that you don't need to destroy a city to control it. You don't need to fire a shot to win a war. And you don't need weapons when you understand the board better than anyone else. Dutch Schultz wanted to erase Harlem. Bumpy Johnson didn't fight back. He made sure no one ever tried again. And that's why his name survived longer than any threat ever made against him.